So Jasmine, this is a case that made a lot of headlines, particularly because of how gruesome it was. Can you take us back to how it all began? It began with a pretty shocking discovery.
Yes, the date was March the 28th, 2022. A woman heading to a grocery store on Eastern Avenue found garbage bags that she believed contained some body parts. Police didn't know who this person was. It was a woman. She had no identification on her. So there was an investigation, but they became stumped at that point. And that day, earlier in the day, at a nail shop at Davenport and Yonge, a manicurist went into a shop where he worked and was concerned the owner, Tian Li, did not arrive for work. And when she didn't arrive, he became concerned. He saw her cell phone in the salon. He tried to call her son, Dallas. No one was answering. So there were a lot of concerns at that time about the disappearance of Tian Li. The next day, police, in an attempt to try to identify this woman, released images of her fingernails that contained a very distinct design. It was green, black, and white. It was described as nail art, and released it to the public with the hope that someone might recognize it. And within 24 hours, that manicurist who was concerned about the owner not returning Tian Li believed that it could have been her because he recognized the design and reported what he found to police.
And a pretty unusual move, police releasing these images of her fingernails, but when that worked and police now had a name, Tian Li, what happens next?
Well, they go to her address, they find the door open, and they see what appeared to be a very bloody crime scene. So immediately they're very concerned. They cannot find her son, Dallas Li. Initially, they thought he might be a victim as well. They were looking for him, but not too long after they realized that he, in fact, was the main suspect in the death of his mother.
Yeah. And investigators were able to find a lot of forensic evidence that traced them to Dallas Li being the main suspect. And this was all presented in his trial, which started 3 weeks ago. Can you go through some of the forensic evidence that was presented in court?
Well, Kelda, there was a lot of forensic evidence. It started with a hunting knife, and they determined that Tian Li's blood was on the hunting knife. It was on a pair of track pants that was owned by Dallas, as well as a hammer in the condo. And so they started to go through all the evidence that they found. They used a chemical to try to lift some of the spots where blood may have been. And they found that there was blood in the hallways and blood that had been cleaned up, an attempt to clean it up. So they realized that, in fact, this may have been where Tian Li had been dragged and her body had been dismembered in the bedroom. And to follow the timeline, they were able to track video images, video surveillance that showed Tian Li arriving back at the condo just after 8 o'clock. And then she arrives, you can see her going up the elevator, and that's the last time she is seen alive. The next time we see someone emerging from the condo is midnight, and that is Dallas Li, where he is pulling a buggy with garbage bags in it that the police determined were the remains of his mother. The video captures him running down, walking with this buggy down Carlaw Avenue. He turns east on Eastern Avenue, and he gets to Berkshire Street. He testified in court that at that point the buggy hit a curb and the bags started to fall out, and he left his mother's remains there. But his intention was to go to Tommy Thompson Park and drop her remains in Lake Ontario, but he never got that far.
And at some point he tried to leave the country.
Oh, he made many attempts to leave the country in just a few days. He was arrested April 2nd, but before that, he went to Pearson Airport, had bought a ticket to the United States, was hoping to leave the country, eventually go to Vietnam. But when he got to the airport, the U.S. immigration officials say, "Where is your return ticket?" They wanted to know when he would be coming back. And when he didn't have a return ticket, they denied him entry. So he left the airport, took an Uber to Niagara Falls to try a land border crossing. But of course, with computers, the U.S. officials say, well, we just had seen that Dallas Lee had been turned away at Pearson for trying to enter the country. So they denied him entry again. He actually bought a ticket to Vancouver, but then realized he wasn't going to go ahead with that because he knew that taking a flight at this time, police were already looking for him, and that might not work out for him as well.
So really tried to dodge authorities at this point. And Dallas Lee has admitted to killing his mom. This is not disputed, but he has pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder. That's his, what's his defense? Can we get into that? What did he say on the witness box?
Dallas Lee told the jury that he'd been abused his entire life and he had suffered severe abuse at the hands of his mother. In closing arguments last week, his lawyers asked the jury to believe his testimony and acquit him, find him not guilty, that this homicide happened in a moment of overwhelming fear of what might follow because he was planning to leave his mother and the condo where they lived. He wanted to finally break that cycle of abuse, and he made that decision, he said. And the defense told the jury Dallas's response was completely reactionary as a result of a lifetime of abuse, and that Tien Lee was a cruel mother to him, controlling him, never let him go on trips as other young people had been able to go on. Lee said his mother was very critical of him for not getting good grades. There was a lot of pressure to be a success. She herself was very ambitious and demanded a lot of her son. But he dropped out of high school. He testified she used to call him stupid and lazy, and that she would beat him with her fists at times, and also with this an instrument, a back scratcher that had a sharpened end, that when she hit him, it had left some red scars on his back. And the jury was able to see an image of those scars as he testified.
And Jasmine, you were there during his testimony. You watched him on the witness box. Was he emotional? What did he seem like?
Well, he was a very soft-spoken, quiet young man. He's dressed in a suit, very unassuming. And he started talking. He would be asked to speak up so the court could hear him. And when he started recalling what his mother would say to him that made him so fearful, he spoke in Vietnamese and he was shouting throughout the courtroom. It was very unexpected because he is so soft-spoken. But then when he would translate for the court what he had just said, he would go back to his normal voice. So that was certainly a moment. And what he was saying was that he was working long hours in the nail salon and reception in a job he really didn't like. He wanted to switch careers. He was going to a youth employment service and hoping to get into the culinary field. The day of the stabbing, he wanted to work on a resume to try to submit so he could move on and try something else. And his mother asked him to come and work into the nail salon. So he wasn't too happy about that. He did come in and he saw that there was somebody helping his mother there. So he decided, he went home early. And then he thought, he wanted to leave. He was going to tell her that evening when she got back that she was going to leave and move in with his aunt, and that he had his bags packed and he was ready to go to change his life around. So his mother gets home just after 8, as we mentioned, the security video showing. And when she gets in the door, he told her that he was going to move, and she became enraged, said that she was going to kill him and his aunt if he ever left. So things escalated. Lee said he went back to his room and his mother continued yelling. And she shouted, "If you don't come back out right now, I'm going to beat you to death." So he said he took his bags and was going to leave. He also took a hunting knife with him. And he said he was bringing it out to the entrance to show his mother that he was serious about leaving. He thought it might scare her. And so then he continued to try to move past her, and he said that she would not budge. And that he then had to endure some punches from her. And that he said when his mother didn't move out of the way, he saw red, took his knife, and started swinging it, catching her in the neck. Lee told the court that he couldn't remember how many times he stabbed his mother. And after it happened, he zoned out in his room for hours, listening to music. He didn't even believe it was real. His cell phone, showed that he had made 3 calls to his mother's number after she was dead. And he said that eventually it did sink in that what he had done. So he ended up cleaning up the mess, the blood, and that's when he began putting her body in the garbage bags and
trying to dispose of it.
Trying to dispose of it.
And both the Crown and the defense, they called their own psychiatrist to the stand to testify. Only one of them, though, actually assessed Lee. Can you talk about that? What did they have to say?
The defense called a psychiatrist, Dr. Mitesh Patel, who diagnosed Dallas Lee with post-traumatic stress disorder due to the abuse he'd suffered as a child, and that at that moment he was in distress at the time. He was triggered by that. But a Crown psychiatrist, Dr. Alina Yosef, reviewed Patel's reports and his diagnosis, and she testified she believes Dallas Lee was severely and emotionally, physically abused throughout his life. She didn't deny that, but in her opinion, his symptoms only appeared after he killed his mother, and that it was not due to child abuse, because in her view, PTSD is when someone relives the trauma over and over again. She said she didn't believe from what she could read, that Dallas was experiencing memories of child abuse. In fact, he was experiencing trauma from the nightmares that he had over stabbing his mother. And she said he killed his mother in a particularly gruesome way. Following this, he had flashbacks that he's being chased by zombies in the Eaton Center. She said that's in line with the terrible way his mother died, and that following his arrest, he was actually at the Eaton Center when police came and found him. So she believes that it was only afterwards, after the killing, that he was suffering from PTSD, which is a major part of the jury deliberations, because the judge has said you have to try to get into Dallas Lee's mind to find out what he was thinking at that moment that this happened.
Well, Jasmine, thank you so much for taking us through the case and the trial. You've been following this from the very beginning. Really appreciate your synopsis.
Thank you very much, Kelda.